Hey, this week on the 167, we're talking about growth in and through community. In other words, discipleship. Welcome to the 167.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Hey, welcome back to the 167. I'm Pastor Lucas Motley, discipleship pastor at New Life Community Church, and I'm here with the senior pastor of New Life Community Church, Rick George.
Hey, good morning. If I stumble over words, it's because my mouth is still sore from having a tooth cut out yesterday.
Are you still taking those pain meds?
Haven't really taken any pain meds, so just bare knuckle, just grinding it out, Just
I don't even need ibuprofen.
so.
I remember when I got my wisdom teeth out, it was like, take these 8 200 milligram ibuprofen. I'm like, I couldn't feel a thing. I couldn't feel my toes in my shoes.
Yep, I took it's an Advil or something afterwards that the dentist gave me. You said you didn't have a shout out, so we'll give a shout out to Julie Humphreys. So
Julie Humphreys, his
thank
dentist,
you, doctor.
dental assistant.
So, yep, she's the dentist here in town, and she inflicted much pain. And no, it wasn't bad at all. It's sore now, but she did a great job.
It could be worse if we could bring back the days where you went to your barber and they just pulled it with some needle nose pliers.
Yeah, she did better than that, and she numbed me up and did well and made me feel a little bit loopy with some kind of gas stuff. But we're not here to talk about my adventures yesterday, so
No, we're here to talk about discipleship.
yeah, so
Growing people change. So I got to give the message on Sunday, so thanks so much for letting me do that.
Yep.
It's always a privilege. Like I said, I worked in a number of different churches, and like I think I've said this to you before, but there are a lot of senior pastors that are not very, generous with their pulpit and stuff, and you've always done a great job. I've been here for 9 years, and it's been an honor.
and preached twice, so that's
Yeah,
great.
preached twice in 9 years. It's a crazy wild ride. No, it was fun, and I'll give you the shout out that the whole plant thing was. I was in your office, and you were like, "You gotta find something."
Plant.
So we brought
worked
in
well.
plants and dill pickle flavored.
Yeah, that was
seeds.
all you. Not, I can't take credit.
I don't
for
want to
that.
take credit for that. So yeah, we were talking about discipleship, and what I define it as is it's growth in and through community.
Yep.
So let's talk just a little bit about why those two elements are so important when it comes to discipleship. That it's both in community, that you're utilizing the people around you, but it's actual growth.
Yeah. So, I think you and I both agree that we were not created to live in isolation. We were created by God, by design, to live in community. When you read about the early church that we talked about a couple of weeks ago in Acts chapter 2, I mean, they shared life together. They spent a lot of time together. They shared their resources, their information, their love. They spent a lot of time together. So that's by design. The flip side of that is to live in isolation. And this isn't about being an introvert or an extrovert. It's about community. And if sometimes people get, I think, kind of caught up in, well, I'm an introvert, so I don't like to be around people. And then you just isolate yourself and you start to have that, I don't know what it's called, think tank or like whatever you think becomes reality. And then you kind of support it by the few things that you choose to look at or read. And then everything that you think becomes real and viable. And even if it's wrong, it doesn't matter because there's nobody there to speak into that. And so you have to have a healthy balance, obviously, of some alone time and community time, because you'll go crazy if you're always, but if you're not around people, then you're only going to think the things that you think. And sometimes those things aren't right. but there's nobody there to tell you otherwise.
Right, and they're not even real. Like when you said that, I think about that movie with Tom Hanks, where he has the volleyball friend Wilson. What is that called? It's Castaway,
Oh, yeah.
where he
Okay.
gets stranded on an island and he literally has to pretend that the volleyball is a person, otherwise he will go crazy.
Yeah.
because he doesn't have anybody to talk to, and it's like, and it's not reality.
Yeah. So there is a danger in not having community, because you can go down a road that, emotionally or psychologically or, in negativity, and there's no one there to say, hey, that is not even a real thing. Or, hey, I'm noticing this about your life. So we need those checks and balances.
Yeah, I think you need to be a certain kind of masochist to want to learn every life lesson because you smacked your head against a tree.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't listen to anybody in my life. And I think that's a really sad existence, is to go through life that there's nobody that you can learn from. Like,
Yeah.
that, I feel like that's a level of pride. And I remember growing up, I had people in my dad's church that off and on, there's this guy that he would struggle and he would just be like, oh, like I'm going to go off and fish on Sunday morning and that's my communal time with God. I don't need any of this. And I'm just like, what a lonely existence that is, and how prideful is that it's like, oh yeah, I don't need anybody else to tell me anything, whatsoever. It's the only God can judge me.
Yeah.
Kind
So
of mentality.
again, it's a balance there. I mean, solitude is a spiritual discipline, to spend time alone with God, but that's not the way we were created to do that for long periods of time. So,
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that God does is he says, hey, it's not good for man to be alone. Let's make him a helper.
yeah. And so, the way we here at New Life have kind of put in place to help people form community is through life groups. So we have various life groups, from larger groups like, our men's Bible studies, some women's Bible studies, those kinds of things, that are larger groups where people come together and build relationships, all the way down to some smaller, home life groups where you meet weekly or bi-weekly and just share life together. Some of those groups are way more intentional about spiritual growth. Some of them are a little more intentional about building relationships. But every group really has, in its purpose, like what we want is a combination of both of those. One might be a little more educational, one might be a little more relational, but there should be a blending of both in every group. And so we've put those in place. So I would say for all of our listeners, if you are not currently connected in some sort of community group, a life group, should they?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So you should get involved in one way or another. Like, find a way. Contact us and say, help me find a group.
And most of our groups are balanced that way. It's hard to maintain that balance in life groups, but that's what I think is the art form of it is, like, even when groups sit down to pick a study, like, the question about it is, how accessible is it? Like, can somebody listening right now, can they join a life group and come in and go, well, I haven't bought a book and and I'm like, yes, there are some groups I can think about are like a rooted group. A rooted group, they bought a book, they're going to go through it for a semester, and then there's kind of an access point where it's like, now we're going to onboard a bunch of people, and then we're going to pick a different book or a different study. But most in-home life groups are very accessible. We use our Right Now Media, which if you don't have a Right Now Media account, you can go online, newlifegardener.com, and click on under media. It'll say Right Now Media. It's like Netflix for Bible studies.
Yeah.
It's a great resource. But so a lot of our groups are using that. Very accessible. You can invite your neighbor. They can come in day one, and just access. They can watch a video and have an opinion about it and talk about it in context.
Yeah.
And so it's like you said, whether it's the big group, small table kind of aspect, or a actual small group that meets in a home with a life group. I think it's just pivotal. It's like you said, even the community aspect is great, but if you just get together with everybody and you eat dinner and you don't ever study the word, you're not in a Christian community, I don't know how you grow.
Yeah. And again, not to discredit or downplay Sunday worship
Oh, no, it's
experience.
great.
So, like, that's a critical part of your growth and development as well. So we should be meeting together and then following that example that we're given in Acts 2, where it says they met together in the temple, like they came together all in one place, and then they met from home to home. Like it was a combination of both. And so we believe that to have healthy relationships with one another and a growing healthy relationship with God, we need both of those. Corporate Sunday morning, big service, celebration, and worship, as well as the personal interactions where we're challenging each other.
During the 167.
Yes.
The 167 hours that aren't on Sunday.
Yeah, there you go.
Shameless plug.
I know.
So I'm going to give you the opportunity. I'm going to open myself up and ask you if you agree with something I said on Sunday morning. So feel free to disagree. It's more spicy if you do.
All right.
So I was talking a little bit about hardened hearts, because in the parable that Jesus tells, he talks about this hardened, trodden path that, you throw seed on it, and because it can't penetrate the soil, Satan kind of scoops it up and carries it off. So, and I kind of made the statement, I think that in our society, there is church hurt. There's legitimate church hurt. There's also a sense that we're kind of borrowing church hurt from culture in order to reject the gospel. Where do you see that church hurt kind of landing with people? Is it legitimate? Like, do people have legitimate church hurt? What are we supposed to do with that?
I'm not a big fan of the term church hurt, but I mean, I get it. I know what people are saying. So I'm not, let's see, do I agree or disagree? Which would make it spicier if I disagree? I think people use the term church hurt oftentimes as an excuse. It's used as an excuse to not attend church, or to not get involved in church, or to not get plugged in at deeper levels. And so we say things like, well, I was in a church and I did this and they didn't like, that's life. And church is made up of imperfect people. And it's not church hurt. It's you got hurt by another person, which happens every day, probably for most people. Somebody hurt your feelings or didn't understand you, and the maturity process takes place as you put yourself in positions with other people to work through some of those things. And sometimes it's just unrealistic expectations, because we feel like, oh, the church should be perfect. Well, it's not. It's not perfect because it has imperfect people in it. And so sometimes church hurt is a term that we use that gives us an out to say, well, I'm not going to go to a life group and I'm not going to invest in people because I did it once and I was hurt.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating what is happening behind the scenes in our hearts and souls. That it's like, I can go to a gym, right? And I can go to a gym and somebody there is a jerk to me, and I don't go, I don't quit that gym. I don't think it is a reflection on the gym. I don't think it is a reflection on exercise culture. And I don't, like, if I was doing leg press and somebody said something snarky to me, I wouldn't be like, I'll never do leg press again. But it's like, but we'll do that in the church, where it's, whether it's the topic, whether it's, they were abusive in their teaching about, this particular thing. Well, now I can never listen to a teaching on that. Or, I went to a church and someone was rude to me. Therefore it's either that church or all church culture. And there's something that's weird that, like, we don't quit. I heard somebody one time, he said, I went through the Chick-fil-A and I got the wrong order one time. I didn't never go back to Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
But we have that crazy, expansiveness that we apply to churches whenever we have a bad experience.
Yeah. And so because of that, then we use, and I say I've been guilty of kind of categorizing various people or groups based on the actions of one.
Yeah.
Right?
Past
Or
experience, which could be a legit experience.
Yeah. And so just to throw the term church hurt out there, without some context, I'm not a big fan of, because it could mean just about anything.
Right.
And so there are times when somebody was literally, taken down a path and they have some hurt because they were misused or taken advantage of, or, had some spiritual abuse in their life or whatever. And so not to discredit that.
Right.
but we can't just throw a blanket of, well, it's that church stuff. It's like, no.
So what do you think that we can do? Like I feel like that's something I didn't get really to dive into a little bit, but like I think that's something that's easier said than done when it's like, oh, we have to soften our hearts. And it's like, okay, but how do I do that? Like, we encounter people all the time that, we'll have a friend who's not a Christ follower and we'll say, you should come to church with me. Jesus loves you. And they have something in their life that hardened their heart. Maybe it was a loss of a loved one. Something bad happened and they can't reconcile that with a good God, or somebody, like I said, that has an abusive experience with somebody who's a Christ follower, that kind of thing. What can we do you think, practically to kind of soften our hearts in those areas and let God kind of till that ground?
Yeah. So I guess the spiritual answer, the biblical answer, is we have to draw closer to the heart of God to know kind of what His plan is, and then submit to that. This coming week, as we have the twofer, right? So it's the twofer, the end of one series, the beginning of another series, and talking about worship being one of our core values, and then going into a series called The Heart of Worship. So this coming Sunday, I'm going to use a passage that says, "Passion for your house consumes me." So passion for the things of God, the house of God, the Word of God, passion for God and His people, that's what should consume us. And when it does, then we're able to move forward. And in that process, our heart is softened. When we don't have a passion for His house, for His people, for community, then we can tend to have some calloused, hard places within our heart. And so I think it's really just aligning ourselves with God and with His Word. That's what helps us move forward and be receptive to God softening our hearts. Like, we play a big part of that. Like, there are many, many times when God has tried to plow up some of that hard ground in my life, and like, I shut the tractor down,
It's like sabotage.
Yep. Like, nope, that tractor is not coming through this field.
Yeah.
And then eventually He does.
Yeah.
I mean, but I'm a big part of that. So I can harden my heart, or I can allow God to soften my heart. And again, some of that's on me. It's not on the church. It's not because of them.
Yeah.
It's not because of what they did, whoever they is, and them, and what the church did. It's me. How did I respond to it? What did I learn from it? How am I going to grow through this?
Well, and I think that it shifts into a little bit what we're talking about with accountability, but I do think that you're right when it's a perspective shift, because like we're talking about, if I am focused on, I will do whatever the Word says. If the Word says it, I want to do it. And if it's different in the Word than it is in my life, it's my life that needs to, like, that's a different perspective. And also, like, the just that shift of, sometimes I think gratitude, or like we talk about having the eyes of Jesus, where it's like, oftentimes if people come to me and they'll say, somebody did this and they wronged me and it hurt me, like that hardened heart because of I think that I don't think that's not on purpose, where Jesus says it's a well-trodden path. It's like people just step all over you.
Right.
And it's like, well, this person stepped all over me, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, now can you shift that perspective to see them as someone who is God's child, and what they did is absolutely, wrong. Like, I'm never going to downplay that, but they're just like you and me, and they, have bad days, and they, they experience those things. I think if you can shift your perspective, that sometimes there's just a little break, that allows, because I thought about this when I'd usually go for walks at night and with Carissa, and if you look at our sidewalks and our streets, every crack has grass growing out of it. It's like, if there's just a little bit of crack, like
you can't get grass to grow in your yard, but
it'll grow in the middle of the street,
right in the sidewalk. It's like,
I saw a meme about that the other day where it said, like, outside plants are like, I will grow through concrete, and inside plants are like, the pH level in the water is, And so, but it's like, I think if you can just get a little gospel in there, it just starts to break and break and break and break. And so, but one of those aspects is the accountability piece. That's that community piece. And so I want to talk just a second about the lost art of accountability. Whereas, where do you kind of see that? Like, why is it so important to have people that can speak into our lives in those particular cases of, like, whether it be encouragement, whether it be breaking that ground, whether it be, stirring people up in their faith? Why is it so important to have those relationships?
So let me first, you said you wanted spicy. I don't know if this is spicy.
Go.
Probably, I don't know if it's politically incorrect or not.
Everything is spiritual.
Yeah. And so I think that going back to what you said, the lost art of accountability, it's something that is lost. And it's, again, my personal opinion. Don't have to agree with it. Personal opinion, it's because as a culture, as a society, we're becoming more and more fragile. So, and you mentioned it in your message about the affirming. We want people to affirm us. And that's playing into our fragility. Like, we're so fragile in that if you tell me that something I'm doing is not right, like, you're going to crush me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
now, and I just want you to, this is who I am. It's like, no, like, this is not right. It's, so what we do, because we're so fragile, I don't want you to hold me accountable and tell me that what I just have done isn't right and I need to correct that. What I want you to tell me is, you're doing great, and you just keep being you, and we'll just ignore all those things that you're doing that aren't right, and we'll just focus on you being you and you being happy. And if I'm not happy, and if you're not, like, supporting me, then I'm going to fall to pieces.
Yeah.
And that doesn't align itself with accountability.
Yeah.
Accountability isn't just saying, I'm your biggest cheerleader. You should be. Like, you need to be a cheerleader. But you also need to be the coach that says, hey, I'm for you, but this isn't a good thing. So, again, you don't have to agree with me. Just my perspective and perception of things is we're just becoming so fragile, or so I don't know, frail in our who we are and what God wants us to be, that if you don't tell me everything I want to hear, then it's going to crush me.
Well, I think that it's a weird balance too, because I would agree with that. And I think that sometimes like, even myself, like, sometimes, like, I said something to somebody the other day, they said something about words or violence. And I said, anyone who thinks that words or violence has never been in a fist fight.
Yeah.
Just like we used to fight, and I'm going, that hurt a lot more than when somebody made fun of me. But I will admit to you that there were things that I misconstrued, or lies I told myself and believed, words that got spoken to me that radically altered relationships in my life with my parents, with, coaches, with, pastors, any of those things. And so the sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, I don't think is accurate in the sense of words can do a significant damage. But I think that we focus on that and the preventative, and we don't also focus on how words can heal. It's like, oh, well, if you, say something, words can damage people. I'm like, yes, but also if words are that powerful and you withhold accountability, like, that is also hugely detrimental to people. Like, that, it's withholding instruction, and it's withholding truth. And so if words are powerful enough to hurt you, then they should also be powerful enough to set you free. They should also be powerful enough to right some of those wrongs.
Yeah. So accountability is, hey, I want you to examine my life, right? And here are some things that we're in agreement that are good and right. And there's some things that, in that understanding of this is good and right, that I'm struggling with. Like, I don't always live up to that. We all have various things in our life that we struggle with. Okay? So this isn't about perfection. It's about acknowledging those areas of weakness and challenge and temptations, and areas that, like, I know the enemy wants to use against me. because of maybe a propensity that I have. And so I acknowledge what is good and right, and I acknowledge my weakness. I need you to help hold me to that, what is right and good, and not just be there to encourage me in all of my failings. Right. And so if you came to me and said, man, I am really struggling with anger, like I'm just so angry at every person, and like I snap back at them, then I'm going to be watching how you interact with people. And if I notice that, hey, you were a little short with them, I'm going to sit down and say, hey, I know it probably wasn't your heart, but the way you responded to that person was like, that was pretty rude. I mean, you were angry. That's what accountability is. It's not saying, hey, what you did, that was great. And, if they don't understand your heart, well, that's on them. You just keep, doing what you're doing, and let them try to figure out how to adjust to your way of dealing with things. That is not holding you accountable.
It'll alienate everyone in your life, and you'll end up lonely. But you do you.
Yeah. So again, from a 30,000 foot view, and just my perspective is, it's because we're so fragile, and we just want people to affirm us. And if you can't affirm me, then I don't want you speaking into my life at all.
Well, and it's crazy because as a consumer, if I said, hey, I have this car and it's been rigorously tested, like, we had an engineer build this car, and then we went and like slammed the door 18,000 times, and we ran it against a wall, and we put it through the test, and now we have adjusted the design and around this feedback, and here's this car. Also, I have this car that as they were building it, I had like one guy do it, and I just told him it was beautiful the whole way. And it's like, we haven't tested it at all. Like, rather than like test the doors, we just didn't want to slam the door. We just, just gently touch it. And it was like, which one would you buy?
Exactly.
Like, you would buy the one that had been tested. And so that feedback is a gift. And I want to move on to something else. But when you were talking, I also thought about, I had seen this documentary one time on TIE fighters, not Star Wars TIE fighters, like Muay Thai fighters.
Okay.
So, but they were, they were punching and kicking and stuff. And they had a person who was like training them or whatever. And what he had this, I don't know if you remember the red wiffle ball bats that are like fat, like wiffle ball bats.
Yeah.
And so if they threw a punch and it was low, or it wasn't where it was supposed to be, he'd smack their arm with the little plastic wiffle ball bat. And they were interviewing the fighters, and they're like, it doesn't really hurt, but it stings, and they were talking about how much they hate it. And, they're like, and these are tough guys. So he's like broken. He goes, he just has a bucket of them. And so he just smacks them all the time that they're not doing it right. And he goes, it doesn't really bruise. It doesn't really hurt us, but it stings. And so I hate it so much that I will stop doing the bad thing. And I'll, and he goes, it's crazy because he goes, I get into a fight, he actually goes and starts to spar in a fight. And he goes, and getting punched, or whatever the result of that would have been, that I threw the punch low, hurts a lot worse than that sting of the bat. But he goes, but in practice, all you get is this little old man just slapping these guys. Swat. Yeah. Like trying to keep them accountable in their form. Yeah. But I was like, oh yeah, it's much better for your friend to come and, smack you with that rather than have life clock
have
you
a
in
little
the face.
sting, that creates some change in your life than this catastrophic, devastation or pain that's a little more critical in life. So
as we're wrapping up, you mentioned it this week. We're having kind of a twofer. We're ending this series. Tell me a little bit about what's next for that.
Yeah. So hopefully invite some friends. So they're going to get 2 sermons in one or something. But it's a
one
twofer.
sermon in half the time. No.
Yeah. So it is week 5 of our core values purpose series. So we're talking about worship, while at the same time it is week 1 of our new series that's entitled The Heart of Worship. So we're going to be digging deep over the next 4 weeks into worship, what it is, why we worship, some examples in Scripture of worship, what God's desire is in that. And so it's going to be a great series that we're leading into, as well as it's going to be the conclusion and helping us understand how valuable worship is to the life of our church. And so invite some friends, be here. It's going to be intriguing.
I think this is going to be one of those series that you want to be here in person if you can.
Yeah, because we're going to be doing some creative things, some elements that are going to take you a little bit by surprise, some that might be a little intriguing. There's going to be some things that after service, you're going to be like, those things that make you go, that I need to explore that. I need to lean into that. So it's going to be challenging. It's going to be inspiring. I think it's going to be a great series. So hope you're here for it. I hope you're here for it.
I'm going to be here for it.
So, all right. So yeah, it's going to be fun learning about worship.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us this week. If you guys have a shout out or you have a question for us, you can email me, lucas@newlifegardener.com. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week here on the 167. If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.